If you want aces, you got aces for tonight in MLB DFS. We have Jacob deGrom, Brandon Woodruff, Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, Lucas Giolito, all involved for today on today's slate in MLB DFS. And that's a good thing because we haven't always had that so far this year. We've had a lot of situations where we've had some guys where, we might not want to use them all that much. But for today, we have a lot of options, which means we got to rank those options, decide how we're feeling about them for DFS, which ones we want to prioritize, who gives us some salary edge, but also who we can afford and which hitters we can afford after plugging in our ace pitchers. So a lot to break down for today. Let's dive on in and do it all right now. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Friday's 13-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 for tonight. Unfortunately, one of those aces is in a bad weather situation again today. Same thing as last night. Max Scherzer is in the rain because rain is in the forecast in Washington for the Nationals and the Giants. That's likely why they scheduled the doubleheader to be tomorrow as opposed to today. So I will talk about Max Scherzer again, but we'll give plenty of alternatives in case that game is rained out, and you'll know where I stand on other guys, just because I would feel it's pretty likely that game does get rained out for today. Rain is possible in Cincinnati for the Reds and the Rockies. Rain odds here are much lower than Washington, but it does still seem like a legitimate concern. Finally, it's just 64 degrees in Boston for the Red Sox and Blue Jays. Downgrade hitters a bit there. I'm mentioning that one because it's not usually that cold in Boston. It is colder in Oakland too, but a deviation from the norm for Boston with it being at just 64 degrees for today. We'll talk more about that weather and hopefully get a good update on Max Scherzer today for our 4 p.m. Q&A stream. As always, if you've not tuned in, that is our Q&A, which we do every weekday on the numberFire or on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, taking your questions about pitchers, stacks, one-offs, MLB DFS process, whatever is on your mind. Go there at 4 p.m. Make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter page and ask your questions live on air, and I'll answer them and show you my thought process and all that live on the air as well. We also have a lot of stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. It's Fantasy Friday here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. UFC 263 podcast via Austin Swaim already posted. I'll have the Heat Check podcast for the NASCAR All-Star race coming up later today. That's recording on YouTube at 10:30 a.m. and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So UFC, MLB, and NASCAR all in your podcast feed pretty much every Friday. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Hey, soccer fans, this season, FanDuel and Captain Morgan are teaming up to give you a one-of-a-kind soccer contest. Introducing Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em, a weekly fantasy contest that is entirely free to play. The contest is simple. All you have to do is make quick predictions for Saturday's games this soccer season. You'll earn points for each correct pick and compete for a chance to win up to $3,000 in prizes every single week. Head over to FanDuel and enter the Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em today. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. And don't forget to make your game day more delicious and sub in the captain. Pitching preview for this Friday night slate. There's a lot of names to go through here because there's a lot of good pitchers on tonight's slate. They are led by Jacob deGrom, who is $12,000 on FanDuel. Brandon Woodruff right behind him at $11,800. Max Scherzer is $11,000. Lucas Giolito is $10,700. Clayton Kershaw is $9,800. Shohei Ohtani is $9,500. Blake Snell, $92,000. Sandy Alcantara is $9,000. We have Tarek Skubal, Tyler Mahle, Charlie Morton, and Aaron Savali as the others at $8,000 or higher. I think we might have lucked out with Scherzer's game yesterday getting postponed because his salary came in a bit too cheap for today. He's $1,000 less than deGrom, $800 less than Woodruff. So if I had the opportunity to use Scherzer for today, I'm going to rank him first. And let me talk about the reasoning for that here, and I'll talk about deGrom and Woodruff throughout that, just because, again, we have to acknowledge that Scherzer's game might not play for today. We talked about the reason for liking Scherzer yesterday. It's a high strikeout match with the Giants. They have a 27% strikeout rate versus righties. That ranks second now on this slate. deGrom is facing the Padres. They are at 21%. Woodruff gets the Pirates. They're not good, but they are also at 22% from a strikeout perspective. So if we're looking at this from an upside perspective, Scherzer has a big edge based on his opponent's strikeout rate. Scherzer also holds a 3 percentage point lead over Woodruff in the strikeout department. So ranking Scherzer over Woodruff is no sweat for me. Versus DeGrom, a bit more of a dilemma. DeGrom has a 45% strikeout rate for the season. Scherzer is at 36%. It's a pretty big gap, but I feel better about Scherzer's pitch count here. He has gone 100, 107, 89, and 108 in his past 4 starts, whereas DeGrom up to 84 last time. I'd project him probably between 95 and 100 this time, but they could also keep him shorter so as to prevent a re-injury here. That gives another leg up to Scherzer there. Finally, there are a lot of high salaried hitters I want. I might not be able to get all of them with Scherzer, but I can get to some of them, whereas it's tougher with DeGrom. So I do think that DeGrom is the number 2 guy for tonight. If we lose Scherzer, I'm going to put DeGrom number 2. With the plus matchup and the plus pitch count and the discount, I'll go Scherzer number 1. So if we get the all clear on Scherzer's weather for today, I will rank him as my number 1 pitcher for tonight. If not, I would go DeGrom number 2, despite the fact that he is high salary, despite the fact the pitch count is low, despite the fact the Padres are very good offense. He's just Jacob deGrom. So that's where I go if we don't get Scherzer. My number 2 option, if we don't get Scherzer, it's actually going to be Clayton Kershaw above Brandon Woodruff as well. He's at a lower salary, $9,700. Lucas Giolito is pretty close, but he's also just a $300 discount from Scherzer. I'd rather just get the $300 to get up to Scherzer, and he just faced the Tigers last week. So Giolito, repeat matchup on the road now. That's enough for me to go with Kershaw here for the second-ranked pitching slot if we assume we take Max Scherzer off the table. The reason to like Kershaw is, the matchup is pretty solid. He's facing the Rangers. They have an 88 WRC plus against lefties, just a 136 ISO. They don't walk. They don't hit a lot of fly balls, and they're not a huge strikeout team, but I would bet that number goes up for today because they do lose the DH and go into Los Angeles. And Kershaw's pitching really well. It took him a bit of time this year to really lean into his off-speed stuff. He was moderate in his usage his first 3 starts, but he's been full Kershaw over the past 9 starts, and he's been awesome in that time. He has a 3.08 skill interactive ERA, 30% strikeout rate, 5% walk rate, really good batted ball numbers too. So honestly, when I'm comparing Kershaw to the top-ranked guys, I think that his profile is very similar to Woodruff tonight. Kershaw and Woodruff both pitching really well from a real-world perspective. They're getting strikeouts. They're at home. They're facing a team that is bad, but doesn't strike out a ton. They're basically clones, I would say, except Kershaw is $2,000 lower salaried. I haven't been huge on Kershaw this year. That'll change tonight. I think that he is the best option after you get past those top 3 with Scherzer, DeGrom, and Woodruff. But if I were ranking everyone for tonight, we'll put Giolito in here too. I would go Scherzer 1, DeGrom 2, Kershaw 3, Woodruff 4, Giolito 5. I think you could make the case for Giolito above Woodruff, despite the fact that it is a repeat matchup, playing in the AL, so it means there's no pinch hitting stuff going on, pinch hitting shenanigans for Giolito. So if I were to change anything there, I would change Giolito over Woodruff, but for right now, we'll go Woodruff over Giolito. But either way, hopefully we get Scherzer. If not, it's DeGrom and Kershaw for me as the top-ranked options for today. As far as a value pitcher, I don't really want to use one, and I might not personally. I think the optimal approach for tonight is to use one of those top 5 guys, whatever your preference may be. And if you're doing multi-entry, I'd probably just focus on those 5. But if I had to pick one value I like the most, it'd be Tyler Mahle. He also has some rain to contend with for tonight, so check back on that later. But if we get the all clear there, a big part of the reason to like Mahle is the matchup. He's facing the Rockies at home. They did get Trevor Story back last night, but they're still terrible against righties. Their numbers here versus righties do include Story. They're at a 67 WRC plus with a 136 ISO. It's a 24% strikeout rate, so not a huge strikeout team, but they're also not a low strikeout team. Mahle himself has been inconsistent recently. If he had been consistent, this would be much more of a confident recommendation. I'd feel a lot better about taking the salary discount, but he let up 7 runs across 2 innings to the Giants a couple starts ago. 2 strikeouts there, 2 strikeouts in the start after that, but he's shown the ability to have a pop game since then with 8 strikeouts in each just past 2 games. he hasn't shown a big shift in those games, so I'm not going to make them his most relevant sample, but the ability to have a big game within his most relevant sample is nice. Mahle has decent numbers overall this year. I'm just not sure what the strikeout upside looks like here overall for Mahle. I don't think he'll outscore the Scherzer, DeGrom, Kershaw types, and it's really tough for me to take an automatic deficit at pitcher, which is a position that's easier to predict, at least for me, than hitter. I think that Mahle's the best one among the lower salaried options, but still not a guy I really want to use for today. So again, no problem for me personally, just ignoring the value options, going with the 5 studs. Mahle is the one guy I would turn to down here, the guy I'd be most willing to use if I did decide to skip on down to this range. So to me, again, the overall focus for today is focusing on those top 5 pitchers, mostly just using them, and then trying to find some salary savers at hitter. So let's talk about that and talk about the stacks for today. And a big focus will be trying to identify lower salary guys. We'll have one stack in here that does not have that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first, the Dodgers actually have some value. They're facing Mike Foltynewicz tonight. The numbers for Foltynewicz are not overall bad this year. He has a 4.75 ERA. It's not terrible. The problem is that the strikeouts have declined considerably from the start of the season, and that has led to a slide backward in his results. And that could be difficult as he faces the Dodgers for tonight. Foltynewicz has been going more toward his sinker and away from his four-seam fastball over his past 7 starts. And I talk a lot about hating sinkers on the show, and Foltynewicz is showing why, because in those 7 starts, he has just a 12% strikeout rate with a 5% walk rate. That means he's letting up a ball in play 82% of the time, and he's not limiting the contact quality of those balls in play. The hard hit rate is 41%. The fly ball rate is 39%. So he's getting fewer strikeouts without increasing his batted ball suppression. I'm not sure why he's using a sinker. He let up 5 runs to the Rockies and the Yankees. Also let up 4 to the Mariners. Obviously, some of those are tough spots because the Rockies game was at Coors Field, but facing the Dodgers in LA might be tougher right now than facing the Rockies in Colorado, just with how bad the Rockies are and how good the Dodgers are. So they just got Cody Bellinger back. They have a 109 WRC plus against righties with a 38% fly ball rate. There will be fly balls here, and they're likely going to be decently well struck. And I think that makes the Dodgers a high-quality stack for today. And again, it helps they give us some value here because we especially want to target the lefties against Foltynewicz, and a lot of their big value plays are lefties. Obviously, A.J. Pollock, Will Smith are not lefties, but Matt Beatty, Zach McKinstry, and Gavin Lux all are. Of those guys, I would be most into Lux. He has been swinging a really good bat recently. McKinstry would be second, followed by Beatty. I'd rank those guys higher, even if Beatty bats higher in the order like he did yesterday. He might not with, the changes in the lineup they're likely to have. Assuming A.J. Pollock plays, he is a righty, but I'd still probably rank him highest of this group, unless McKinstry bats high enough in the order. So I would say right now it's Pollock, Lux, McKinstry as the ranking for these value plays, followed by Beatty. So depending on who plays, that's where I'd rank them. But we should get at least 3 of those guys in there. And those are 3 pretty solid value plays. You can get at least one of the studs in there as well. So the Dodgers, to me, a good stack, regardless of what you're doing with your pitching options for today. Our second stack is not as affordable. They are likely a Kershaw-only type stack, but I like the Astros a lot. They are in Minneapolis. It's decently hot today. Again, it's 81 degrees. That's good for hitters, and the Astros have an elite matchup here. So I do want to talk about them despite the fact I can't get there from going with DeGrom most likely. They're facing Matt Shoemaker, who is staying in the rotation for now, and that might not be long-lived, but, if you have to use for now with staying in the rotation, probably tells you all you got to know. For the season, Shoemaker has a 5.25 skill interactive ERA with a 15% strikeout rate and a 9% walk rate, letting up a lot of balls in play. It doesn't have the worst batted ball numbers, but they're also not the best, and he kind of needs to be the best to overcome the rough plate discipline numbers. I don't see that changing, and I would not expect to be able to stack against him much longer because I don't think he'll be in the rotation that much longer, especially not with such a tough matchup on deck for tonight. So I think the Astros grade out really well as the second-ranked option behind the Dodgers for today. As mentioned, though, we're not going to get to the Astros with DeGrom most likely because all the main guys here are $3,600 or higher, which means we will need a value second stack even to get to them just with Kershaw, which is a bit of a bummer. But I would mention that Kyle Tucker is a decent exception. He is $3,200. He has a 231 ISO against righties, minimal number of strikeouts, 5 stolen bases. He is a tremendous one-off, and he would be a focal point for stacks, even assuming he hits lower in the order. So it's tough to fit the Astros in with Scherzer/DeGrom, but I would at least try. I don't know if you'll be able to do it, but you need to find a lot of value. Maybe just go with all 4 of the Dodgers values plays we talked about before. That could potentially work, but either way, try to get exposure to them, even if it does mean increasing your Kershaw exposure a little bit. The overall key, though, with talking about the Dodgers and the Astros is that we are desperate for a value stack, like a stack where we can just go load up on a bunch of guys with low salaries. And if I'm looking for one team there that checks that box, pretty emphatically, it'd be the Brewers. I think they can be a good crutch for us for value once again. They're facing Chase DeYoung. DeYoung is making his 3rd start in the big leagues this year. Other 4 have come in AAA. And DeYoung has had a lot of strikeouts in AAA, but that has not been the case in the majors. He's made 4 starts in the majors since the start of last year. And he has a 25% strikeout rate, which seems high, but it's just a 4-start sample. And his swinging strike rate this year in the majors is 7.5%. He also has the kind of contact profile that we love to stack against. He lets up a ton of fly balls. He lets up enough hard contact to get by as well, especially this year. That's led to worse results than his peripherals across each of the past 3 seasons at each stop, whether it be the minors or the majors. The strikeouts do make this Brewers stack kind of risky because they are obviously fond of that 3rd strike. So they could get shut down here, but I think they'll make enough contact. And when they do, should be stuck pretty well. They grade out well as a pure value stack for tonight, and we are looking for that. So the Brewers, to me, worthwhile despite the risk. Both Omar Narvaez and Dan Vogelbach are solid at $2,500. We have Willy Adames and Luis Urias in the middle infield. I prefer Urias between the two because he has a better ISO versus righties, fewer strikeouts, hitting higher in the order. He's $2,600. Jace Peterson works as a punt play at $2,100. He hit for power in AAA, bit of speed too. So outside of the Dodgers' bottom of the order, I would say the Brewers are the best spot for value on the slate. We'll talk about a couple more spots in things to watch. But first, let's start things off in things to watch with a value pitcher I didn't talk about, which is Tarek Skubal. And not talking about Skubal has nothing to do with him. I am a firm believer in what he's doing, and I plan on going at him in the very near future. I just can't get there against the White Sox. Not only are they a great team against lefties, but they also just saw him last week, and he handled them very well, and he could do it again. So Skubal has a great game within his range of outcomes because he did it last week, but too big of a risk for me in a repeat matchup. I will sit this one out and happily go at him next week, almost regardless of what team he's facing. Skubal, I think, is legit. Just want to get him in a better spot than what he has for today. 2 other spots you can turn to for value at hitter are Cleveland and Cincinnati. I mentioned before that Cincinnati has some funky weather, so check back on the weather later, but they're facing Kyle Freeland. He has made only 3 starts this year, but he has brutal plate discipline data. Plate discipline data tends to stabilize pretty quickly, so I think that bodes well for the Reds. I prefer the Reds versus righties, but, with Freeland being a lefty, that means Eugenio Suarez, Tyler Stevenson, Jonathan India, and Kyle Farmer all gain the platoon advantage for tonight. Stevenson specifically is $2,500 and seems to have some pop against lefties. So I do like Cincinnati. Cleveland's pretty good too, though. They're facing Justin Dunn, who is just coming off the injured list. He missed just 1 start, so should be pretty much a regular go for Justin Dunn for today, but he was struggling before the stint on the IL. He had a 5.07 skill interactive ERA with a 53% fly ball rate. Cleveland is hitting for more power recently, so I do like Josh Naylor a lot at $2,100. He's probably going to bat somewhere in the middle of the order. He's got some pop. Bobby Bradley just got called up. He's shown a lot of power in the minors. He is $2,500. He could bat a bit lower in the order, but I'm okay taking a swing on him because the upside is there. So between the Dodgers, Brewers, Reds, and Cleveland, you should be able to get to DeGrom, and you should be able to get to some of the higher salaried stacks as well. So maybe it's a situation where you go less stacky for today, load up on the Astros with DeGrom, and then just plug in all the 2,100 guys we mentioned, like Naylor. We got a couple of the Brewers in there as well, some Reds guys who are okay, Dodgers as well. I would at least give it a shot. I think it's worthwhile for today. So maybe get a bit creative to jam in DeGrom plus the Astros, and I think you can do it, but it will force some nimbleness with regards to which hitters you want to use. That'll do it for today here on the Solo Shot. But as mentioned, we are back here at 10:30 on the FanDuel YouTube page for the NASCAR podcast, and then again on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages for the Q&A today. That is at 4 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you are subscribed not only to the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, but also the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. If you have questions for me before 4 p.m., I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for setting up the video broadcast for today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.